Hi there, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks for joining me on this podcast today. Hope you're doing well. You're getting ready for the holiday season as I'm recording this episode. And today I want to touch on a kind of broad topic and then go into something very specific. Sometimes things on the surface may seem great and we may take them for granted and assume they're for our benefit. But sometimes you really have to dig a little deeper to understand if something is for your benefit or someone else's. And in the world we live in today, I would argue that a lot of our freedoms that I personally cherished in growing up in this country and living in this country are being challenged. And we have a lot of people in our world who are trying to control our lives, whether it be corporations, whether it be financial institutions, and certainly our government. Our government is playing a much larger role in our lives, more so than in prior years. And you got to wonder if that's a benefit or a harm to us all. I understand around certain areas that there might be a need for government regulations as things can run rampant. But when the government now is involved with so much in our world, I think that may create a sense of security and control in our environments. However, I think it's at the expense of our freedoms. And this certainly plays a role in our financial lives. Imagine how much the government impacts our financial lives, the economy, even though you think about the Fed being an independent entity, well, they're in cahoots too with the government, and it's helping them sort of guide the economy. And that's, you talk about election. So we're not going to go there in this episode, but I wanted to share one example of this and show you what this is causing for our financial lives, and just to give you perspective so you can sort of think through it a bit for yourself and determine if it is the right approach for you or not. And this is a podcast, and this is why I love this forum, to give you information so you can make better decisions for yourself, empower you to make the best decisions. So think about this. Think about one of the most sacred financial tools that most Americans know about. It's the 401k, or in its kind of offshoot IRA. So let's just go with the 401k, which was created back in the late 70s, early 80s. Ted Benna, and this was a piece of the tax code that was sort of leveraged at the time when the marginal tax rate was 70+%. So imagine that for a second. Today, our highest tax bracket is 37 at the federal level. Imagine it was like 70, and it was even higher than that in prior decades. But in the time in the 70s, when the 401k came to be in its truest form, started when tax rates were crazy high. And so for a lot of executives at the time were making the amount of income they were making that touched on the highest brackets, they were looking for a way to shield some of their income. And so this made perfect sense at the time when, nearly 3/4 of your income would, at a certain level would be taken away to federal taxation, not even state level. So it was a large focus area to help shield that. And so obviously for those people now who are maybe, decades later going to use those dollars at a maybe lower tax bracket, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. I think they won in that game. But over the course of time, as a lot of companies have got rid of pensions through their companies, and it got diverted to 401k plans. So now individuals are not relying on their companies to help situate their retirement and plan for their retirement. Now it's in the hands of every individual American to figure that out. And certainly the 401k is an option that has now just become the basic tool that people think about when they think about retirement. And so what is great about it? So the conventional wisdom is that I can use a 401k. I can get a quote unquote tax break in a given year, deferring it, basically postponing the tax calculation. And your money can go to invest and put it into an account that will be there for long periods of time, hopefully, and you can't touch much of it without some penalties along the way, because you can't be trusted to use it. But we're going to make it available later in life for retirement. And then at that time, you'll be taxed, right? Because the government's not going to just, forgive that. They're going to tax you on that. And who controls those tax rates? Well, they do. So that's the idea, and that the thought is you're going to need less money in retirement than you did when you're living your life, because you have kids, other things. And so that, in the end, you'll pay less taxes on the money that you put into these accounts you've been deferring, and that you'll win in this game. So it's been created as a benefit to most Americans. Ironically, that, they had to kind of create a solve for this issue by creating Roth IRAs to balance it. So they made an initial sort of mistake in laying this in, but now they corrected by creating a Roth IRA. So you kind of wonder about that, but I digress. So, when we get back to the 401k for a moment and think about this for a second. So granted, today we're at marginal tax rate, the highest at 37%. And so you're going to certainly save that in a given year, and that money's sitting in these accounts. But then that money is piling up, and you're becoming a partner with the IRS for down the road, right? When you're going to have to use this, one, to create income for your retirement, and two, is you're going to have to take it, right, at some point later on. Right now it's at 72. So there's a lot of rules around when you can use it through, obviously, life, right? That's tied in, and most of them are tied to what? The stock market. So that's obviously there's a connection there for sure. And that was not unintentional. And so those dollars are sitting in accounts that you can get to touch later on. But I'll ask you a few questions. Well, who knows what the tax rates will be? Well, most people are assuming tax rates only could go up. And if you look historically, as I mentioned with, when the 401ks were first created, tax rates were way higher. And when you look at today's situation, right, with the amount of debt our government has, the unfunded liabilities situated with Social Security, Medicare. I mean, our debt today in this country is well over $30 trillion and growing. And so you cannot tell me that that doesn't mean anything. And so our debt to GDP is well over 100% these days, and it's going higher. And so when we look at this, most people, when you ask any CPA, what's their response around it? It's tax rates are going up. So you're moving into a regime where you don't even control the tax rates. Whatever amount the government would like to tax us, is at their liberty to do so. So that is a challenge that most people are coming to realize as they're heading into retirement. And so when we're dealing today, here in 2022, inflation is high. And so obviously that isn't even, not the level of it is not intentional. This is a little higher than even our Federal Reserve would want. But even at lower levels at 2-3%, they're looking for inflation. So when we get to later stages in our life, our dollars will not go as far. It's just the way it's working, right? Each dollar that we own will slowly erode over time. Unfortunately, it's being escalated. So most people are going thinking that, hey, I don't need as much money in retirement. Well, that may or may not be true, but you're going to need more anyway because things just cost more. So when I asked, what do you think inflation looks like in the future? Well, most people recognize it's going to continue on. And who knows if we have this sustained level of inflation for many decades to come. It's unknown at this stage, but at minimum, they're looking for inflation to continue to grow, at least at some level. So we kind of try to get back to that lower levels, but it's still going to erode a lot of our wealth. So the likelihood is you're going to need more money in retirement. And frankly, between you and me, like I think it's just not a abundant sort of mindset to say I'm going to want less in retirement. I want the same or more income in retirement as I go into later stages of my life to be able to do more, impact more for things in my life. I'm not looking for lower. So even if it is so, you're going to need more money even to just sustain the lifestyle, right? That's going to require more dollars. So, and then what happens? Tax rates come in, you have to pay taxes on those when you start withdrawing from these accounts. And so it may actually turn out to be more in terms of taxes, especially when you don't even have any deductions when you're living your life, whether your house, your kids, and education, and other things you can deduct. Most families are not going to have as many deductions anymore. Maybe they paid off their home, their kids are older, right? So there's not going to be as many deductions, and who knows what that looks like going forward. And so there's a lot of headwinds in here, or challenges, may or may not come to fruition, but there's a lot of things that are going to put pressure on people's accounts to use their dollars if they've had most of them sitting in accounts like this. And so, that's one area to it. And for people who are invested in the stock market, and I'm not saying that's a bad place if you know what you're doing, that you have to deal with the volatility of it like we're dealing with today. And so having money sitting in these accounts may not be attractive to use when you're dealing with that volatility. If you take a loss in your account and then you use those dollars on top of it, you're kind of exacerbating the issue. And that's this concept of sequence of return risk that we have to factor in. But, so earlier in the stages of people's retirement, as they have free access to the dollars, you can use other accounts while your investment accounts regrow. But, the thing that people are going to run into, and it may change, they did change it recently, the required minimum distribution age from 70 and a half to 72. So now at 72, you have to take it. And whether you like it or not, and regardless of what the market's doing or not, you're going to have to take a minimum amount to serve the government, because they want their tax money now, right? We let you hold it off paying taxes. Now they want their cut, right? And so they're going to require it. And that's for every year after 72 as a current law stands. So again, this is just kind of shows you the who's controlling the regulations, or who's controlling your dollars here. And so you're going to be subject to who knows how much in terms of taxation and use of your dollars. You're not going to know that amount. So it's a little bit of a guessing game in terms of what retirement income will be available to you. So you're going to have to wrestle with that and juggle it. So am I saying that don't have any money here? No, I'm not saying that, but you got to be careful if it's a significant portion of your assets, because they're going to be exposed to potential pressures in the future. And what happens, as we, further down the road here, if you have a spouse and husband and wife who are having a large distribution from these types of accounts, what happens is that once one spouse dies, and say they still have that ample asset in that account, that's going to really hike up the tax rate for the single filer now, right, in that scenario. So you're taking money that someone's getting, say, whatever amount is, $100,000, $200,000, or whatever amount it is. Now you're going to apply it not to a joint account, but a single account, right, for a spouse. So that's going to increase their tax rates pretty much automatically just because of the filing status. So who knows who knows what those tax rates will be at the time. So you're going to move someone into a higher tax bracket for sure, and it could impact costs around Social Security, Medicare. So you got a lot to consider. So this is sort of a kind of tax sort of nightmare that could evolve potentially down the road. So having other assets outside of this would be advisable to consider. Now, the last thing I'll share, and this kind of just shows you the progression along the lines of this, is that, one of the thoughts some people have is to not use these accounts, even though that you're going to be required to at 72, but don't use as much of it so I can pass that on, keep the deferral going. Well, as part of the Secure Act that was recently passed, now any of those inherited accounts, qualified plans, there is a limit to how long you can defer them for non-spouse sort of recipients. And now there's a 10-year window that, say, your child inherits your IRA or 401k, and now they're going to have to take all of that money out in 10 years. Because why? Because the government wants their tax money, right? This is not going to be forgiven at any point. It's going to just kick the can down the road a little bit, and then it passes to the next generation, and they're going to have to eventually liquidate that account in 10 years and pay the taxes on it. And unfortunately for some, depending on timing of this, if they're all older, your children may actually be at some of their highest tax brackets. So they're going to be subject to having to take this money out and pay even high taxes in their rates, because if they were successful, they're already having income coming in, and they're just going to add this income on top of it that may boost their taxable income to levels that are going to push them up in rates. So, and again, we don't know what rates will be at that time, but this is where the potential impact of all this, that it will never sort of be forgiven. It'll just have to be paid, but just by the next generation. So, again, these are just realities to kind of think through and evaluate. Is this the type of area you want to put most of your money, being subject to these potential issues that are coming down the road that essentially relinquish some of the control you have on use of your dollars, right? You have so many factors that could be influencing it. And so this is why it's important, depending on where you are in your sort of financial journey, is to help to start balancing out, shifting into things that you can own and control more of, and are not always dictated by, government rules and taxation. And so this is why we love to sort of find places to put money in tax-free zones earlier than later, and make some strategic decisions around how to shift some of those dollars to tax-free zones, so you have more flexibility and balance in what you're doing financially, so that you can sort of pivot as things change and economies change. That's the one thing that I know of, is that things will change. That's just a fact of life. And so being as best prepared with different options will give you the highest chance of succeeding, keeping more of your wealth, be able to use it, and certainly pass more on, if desired, to the next generation, to give them an even greater chance to go above and beyond what you did in your lifetime. So I'll end it here today. I mean, I hopefully this wasn't a Debbie Downer. This is more of a empowerment. This is where it could go. Now it's time to take some action today to start evaluating what you can do. What are some options for you, given some of the potential probabilities of where things are going? No one has an exact crystal ball. I wish I did. Things would be much easier, but we got to go with the information we have and what could happen. And then what are your response, and having some options available will give you the greatest chance of succeeding. So I hope this was helpful. If you want more help with any of this kind of stuff, certainly reach out to me. There's plenty of stuff on my podcast here to give you some information, or certainly just reach out. Love to chat. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it, and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances, so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life, and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.